Roll board.
In the fourth episode of The Sopranos' fifth season, a 74-year-old man stood in a garage full of stolen televisions, watched a probation officer walk in, and realized instantly what had just happened to him. Tony Soprano had set him up. He knew it. One phone call to the FBI could have torched Tony's entire operation. He made no such call. Why? His name was Feech LaManna. And before we go any further, you need to understand exactly who this man was. Feech wasn't some mid-level button man.
It was this old mustache named Feech LaManna.
He was a legend, a made guy from the old country.
Tony and Jackie Aprile knocked over your card game.
The man whose card game a young Tony Soprano had robbed decades earlier. The same robbery that got Tony his button in this thing of theirs.
20 years. Modern.
Feech did 20 years in prison without a peep. And when he walked out in season 5, he was stepping into a world that had moved on without him. That's where the trouble started.
I came to ask for my game back.
He tried to insert himself back into the crew.
What the fuck are you talking about?
The lawn cut.
Through his nephew, he muscled in on the turf of a neighborhood gardener, a civilian who happened to mow Polly's aunt's lawn, then broke the man's arm when he pushed back. He talked about respect in a way that sounded a lot like, "I'm coming for what's mine."
Did I learn nothing from Richie Aprile? Nip it in the bud.
Feech.
And Tony, a boss who had just watched Richie Aprile try the same thing a few years earlier, wasn't going to let history repeat itself. So Tony had Christopher and Benny dangle a truckload of stolen flat-screen TVs in front of Feech.
I got a garage right here.
Feech, ever hungry, agreed to store them for $2,000 and a set for himself. The very next day, a corrupt parole officer on the DeMeo family payroll made a surprise inspection. Within hours, Feech was back behind bars for what would almost certainly be the rest of his life. He was old. He would probably die in there, and he knew Tony had done it.
Was the better move than taking him out. Man was a legend.
So here's the question that's haunted fans for 2 decades. Why didn't he pick up the phone? The simple answer is Omertà, but that word gets thrown around so casually it's almost lost its meaning. So let's actually unpack it.
He was made on the other side.
Feech LaManna wasn't just old school. He was made in Italy. Before he ever set foot in New Jersey, he had sworn an oath that a whole generation of American mobsters only half understood. For guys like Feech, Omertà wasn't a rule. It wasn't a strategy. It was identity. Take it away, and there was no person left underneath. Consider a real-world comparison. In the late 1990s, Genovese consigliere Jimmy Ida was offered a 15-year plea bargain in exchange for cooperation. He turned it down. He went to trial. He got life. He'll die in prison. He could have walked out in his early 70s. He chose death behind bars over saying a single word. That is the world Feech was raised in. And there's a moment from season 1 that tells you everything you need to know.
And talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper?
Tony tells Dr. Melfi he's always admired Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type. He didn't admire him for being tough. He admired him for not talking, not complaining, not explaining himself. Feech is that archetype made flesh. There's a line Tony himself weaponizes throughout the series. He's from the old school. He shouldn't have to explain himself. And when fans debate this question online, that phrase shows up again and again as if it's the final word. Because for Feech, it kind of is. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Omertà isn't just about bravery, it's about math. If Feech ratted, he would lose everything that made him Feech. His reputation, his legacy, the respect of every old-timer still living who remembered what made in Italy used to mean. Even inside prison, his entire standing was built on being that guy. The stand-up, silent, ghost of the old country. Strip that away, and he's just a broke 74-year-old with a target on his back and no family left willing to protect him. For Feech, silence wasn't a sacrifice. Silence was the last thing he owned. But let's pretend, for a second, that Feech's principles wavered. Let's say he picked up the phone. What would he actually tell them? This is the piece almost everyone misses. The mafia is structured like a paramilitary organization. Orders run up the hill, money flows down. Feech was running card games, maybe a small loan sharking operation. He kicked up a percentage to Tony. That was the entire extent of his direct interaction with the boss. Tony didn't sit at those card tables. Tony didn't collect the vig. Tony's name wasn't on anything. The cash moved through 2 or 3 hands before it ever touched him. And by the time it did, it was clean. So what does Feech actually have?
As far as the feds are concerned, they got the boss of the family in jail.
He could tell the FBI that Tony Soprano is the boss of the DeMeo crime family. They already know. He could say that envelopes of cash get delivered. They can't subpoena an envelope. He could testify about crimes committed 20 years ago, most of which are long past the statute of limitations. Here's the reality check.
Pumping Sarro.
Pussy?
The FBI had Big Pussy wired for years. They had Adriana LaServa feeding them information from inside Christopher's bedroom. They had informants at multiple levels of the crew.
Fucking Rico case?
And they still couldn't close a RICO case on Tony? Feech LaManna, a 75-year-old man who'd been out of the game for 2 decades and back on the street for a matter of months, was not going to be the guy who finally cracked it. And the feds knew this.
Made guy, he flipped about 10 years ago when he got busted for peddling eight.
Getting someone into witness protection isn't free. It's a massive, expensive, long-term commitment. The government isn't spending that kind of money on a small fish with stale information. They want what prosecutors call the sure thing, the witness who can put the boss in the room when the order gets given. Feech wasn't that witness. Even if he had walked into the nearest FBI field office and offered everything he knew, they probably would have driven him back to prison themselves. His information was, as one fan online put it perfectly, a popcorn fart. Now let's get practical. Say impossibly that Feech decides to cooperate. Say even more impossibly that the FBI decides he's worth the paperwork. What happens next? He dies. Not eventually, not metaphorically, actually, physically dies. Probably within weeks. Because prisons are full of made guys. Prisons are full of made guys who owe favors to other made guys. And word travels inside faster than it travels outside. The moment Feech starts talking to the feds, every connected inmate in his facility, and half the ones in facilities he's never been to, is suddenly very interested in his schedule. This is something Tony doesn't even have to arrange. The machine handles it automatically. A rat is the lowest form of life in that world, and eliminating one is how you earn points for yourself.
Feech was made before the electric light.
Feech knew this. He'd spent 50 years around this life. He'd watched it happen to other men. He knew exactly what came for a man who talked. And here's the kicker. The moment a probation officer he'd never seen before walked into his garage, Feech knew Tony was behind it. These guys don't believe in coincidences. He wasn't fooled for a single second. But he made a calculation. Die a legend in a cell, remembered by every old-timer as the stand-up guy who took it on the chin. Or die a rat in a prison laundry room, his name spat on for generations. For a man whose entire existence was built on reputation, that wasn't really a choice at all. But here's where the show is doing something much more clever than any of that. Because David Chase isn't just writing a plot, he's writing a eulogy. Look at every old-timer in The Sopranos. Junior, Paulie, Feech, Beansy. Each one of them comes back into the story convinced things used to be better. That if everyone just followed the old rules, this thing of theirs would still mean something. And every single time, the show quietly demolishes that idea.
The man, the legend, Feech LaManna.
Feech is the purest version of this. He comes out of prison convinced he still matters.
Me? I'm Fred Astaire.
Convinced the old ways will carry him.
I know it was wait for a long time.
And within a single season, he's back inside. Outmaneuvered not because Tony is smarter, but because Tony is willing to do things an old school guy isn't. The irony is devastating. Feech's commitment to the code is exactly what gets him locked up, and his commitment to the code is also exactly why he can't fight back.
The code of silence, or the Omertà, or whatever you want to call it.
He can't rat because ratting would erase him, but refusing to rat means accepting that the code he believes in has just been used as a weapon against him. That's the real answer to the question.
I'm sorry if I offended you.
Feech LaManna didn't rat on Tony Soprano, not because he couldn't, and not because it wouldn't work, though both of those are true. He didn't rat because he had already decided, sometime back in the old country, decades before he'd ever heard the name Soprano, that silence was the price of being who he was. And he had always been willing to pay it. Feech LaManna kept his mouth shut because an old man with nothing left still has his name, and in his world, that was worth more than freedom. So here's the question I want you to sit with. Of all the old school guys in The Sopranos, Feech, Junior, Paulie, Beansy, which one got the ending they actually deserved? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one.
Poor fucking Feech LaManna. Tony sent the wrong ex-con back to jail.